How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, where today we are delving into a mod of my own creation. A few weeks ago, I decided to recheck to see if the Elden Ring Diablo style loot mod was available, and to my dismay, it had not been updated for quite some time and was not compatible with the DLC as it currently stands. So, given the fact that I wanted to do something similar, and I have been wanting to get into some of the modding tools out there for quite some time now, I decided that there was no better chance than to go ahead and try to do this myself in Dark Souls 1, and that is indeed what I have done. So the general idea behind this mod is that every piece of armor and weaponry has been randomized and assigned a rarity ranging from common all the way up to godlike, where the armor and weapons that are common are basically the equivalent of a +0. For weapons, if they go up to +15 normally, well, a godlike would be more along the lines of a +17, 18, 19, so they are generally going to be stronger than what you can actually acquire in the base game. Similarly, for armor, it is kind of the same way, where the common level armor is the equivalent of a +0, and then as you go up and up in rarity, they become stronger and stronger. All armor and weapons have also been assigned special effects, so you can find one piece of armor that, for example, gives you an increase in stamina, whereas the next piece of armor or weapon may do something differently, like increasing your raw damage, upping a certain elemental defense stat, providing additional resistance to statuses like poison and curse, so on and so forth. Similarly, all the rings have been modified so that now rings have a variety of rarities as well, again ranging from the common all the way up to the godlike rarity, and they get stronger and stronger as you go on, with the rare class of rarity for rings being roughly equivalent to the base game. So if you find common stuff early on in the game, it's going to be a little bit weaker than what you would find in the vanilla game, but if you could find one of those really strong rings, then it might be a good idea to build around that. Finally, in terms of loot, all of the loot has been randomized throughout the variety of different weapons, the variety of different enemies that you can find in the game. So, Hollows and Undead Berg might drop a few different weapons or armor pieces that they normally couldn't drop, and that stays consistent throughout the game. So it kind of combines a item randomizer, although everything isn't 100% randomized, as key items are still going to be found in the same location. Shop vendors will still generally sell their regular loot that they have, although with a variety of rarities, with later shop vendors holding rare pieces of loot. And then a couple of other things have been maintained for the sake of game progression. The general idea behind this is that it's a good idea to go ahead and clear out the entire area in order to get more and more loot, as you never know what you might roll. And if you find a really strong item in the early game, perhaps that's something you'll want to build around. The one final note, I guess two final notes on the balancing system, at least in the version of the mod that I am playing and I have currently made available as of the time of this recording, is that all weapons have had their requirements increased as you move up and up throughout the levels of rarity. So whereas a common tier loot weapon would just have whatever it regularly has, every increase in rarity might require just a little bit more stats than one would normally have. So that is kind of to try to help and balance the game, so you don't just find a super strong weapon early game and are able to throw it on, as again this kind of removes upgrades from this mod, as the upgrade system is more along the lines of finding stronger loot and replacing whatever you have. And then armor has similarly been affected, where the weight of more rare armor has been increased. Again, that's to try and combat the ability to just find 3 or 4 really strong pieces of loot in the early game, throwing them all on, and still playing around in light or medium roll. So if you want to use really good equipment, you're going to have to be either in heavy load or increase your endurance up really high. Enemies have also been increased in terms of HP, attack, and defenses, but to compensate, there are a little bit more souls that you gain throughout the run. So, all that being said, let's pop into it. I'll show you my run, and I will let you know at the end of this video where you can find the mod if you want to try it yourself. Let's get into it. So starting off the run, we got to choose our class. Today I decided to go Cleric as I wanted to do a Strength and Faith build behind the idea of using some weapon buffs and miracles later in the game because I always enjoy that specific class. After we take down the Asylum Demon with our black fire bombs, we can see the first two pieces of loot that we are going to have available to us. The East-West Shield, which provides a nice increase to all of our status resistances, and if you note, the base just means that it is a regular style of infusion, as another thing I have done is also allowed for all of the weapons to receive the various infusions, plus one special one that I decided to add for this mod as well. And then our mace, which provides a nice restoration effect as it increases our HP whenever we hold it in our hand. We head down to Firelink and begin scavenging the area to find ourselves some new pickups to see if we wanted to replace anything. Fortunately, the infusions and effects that we found from the small number of weapons in the area weren't really of interest to me, as I decided that we're just going to go ahead and stick with our mace and head up to Undead Burg. Here we take down one of the hollows and find our first piece of legendary equipment, the Elite Cleric Leggings, which is the second highest tier of loot in the game. It also provides us a nice increase with magic damage. Again, this is kind of similar to how the Bellowing Dragon Crest or Crown of Dusk would work, although this doesn't directly affect the attack ratings like those do. Instead, it more acts like a power within effect, just for magic damage specifically. A few more pieces of loot here and there, but nothing really interesting of note, so we decided to go ahead and face off against the Taurus Demon, who's our first legitimate boss so far. It's kind of tough to tell in this fight specifically, but the increase in health is definitely a little bit noticeable, as if you fought the Taurus Demon the number of times that I have, you will definitely notice that he takes a little bit longer to take down, although that could also be owing to the fact that we're still rocking our common level mace. Either way, that's really the first true boss of the run down, and now we can really get going. On-the-fly changes to the mod, as I didn't realize this until a little bit later, but there are some of the loot tables in the version of the game that I was running that didn't 100% properly roll all of the items at equal weight. However, for the mod that is up on my Discord and hopefully on Nexus mods, depending on when you watch this, that should be fixed, so all variety of loot can be dropped at the godlike tier. Either way, I figured it was good enough time to go ahead and summon everybody's favorite Sunbro in Solaire to try and take down the gargoyles. Again, this one was a pretty easy fight thanks to having Solaire with us, but certainly you could definitely tell in this fight that the increases in HP and damage to the bosses that we're facing are really going to become an issue later if we can't find ourselves some better class weapons. Up to the top of the parish to go ahead and ring our first Bell of Awakening, and because we did not choose the Master Key, it's going to be our next stop heading down to Blighttown by way of the Depths. In order to do so, of course, we need to go and face off against the Capra Demon, and thanks to the pickup of the Wolf Ring earlier in the Darkroot Garden, as well as some pretty nice armor that we have, a variety of different tiers at this stage in the game, we have enough poise in order to make the fight rather easy, as long as we clear out the dogs and use our big bonk stick, the great club that I was able to get from the Gargoyle drop, and we take down the Capra Demon quite easily. Next boss on our list is going to be the Gaping Dragon, and I don't necessarily think the Gaping Dragon is super difficult, although in this fight you can definitely see that the increase in HP is going to be something that we need to concern ourselves with. And of course I had to summon our bro Solaire, as I was hoping to get enough sunlight medals in this particular run in order to afford great lightning spear. However, the Gaping Dragon does go down on our first try thanks to our lightning pine resin and great club, but we're definitely going to need to find ourselves an upgraded weapon if we're going to want to stay paced with the game. Heading down to Blighttown is actually a fairly easy trip this time, mostly owing to the fact that we got ourselves the Bloated Sorcerer Head, which, as I mentioned, has the passive HP regeneration effect applied to it. So for the most part, the Toxic and Poison are effectively offset from each other with our healing effect, and that makes running through the swamp and getting down the rafters to the base level of Blighttown rather easy, although there were still some issues that I had with some of the enemies in this area. We also fought off the NPC invader down here and got the butchery knife, which had a nice rarity applied to it. It was the rare rarity, and it is an axe weapon, which are pretty good in this game because they have relatively quick movesets. In fact, I liked it so much I decided to go ahead and use that as our weapon of choice against Quelaag. Quelaag's another one of those relatively easy Dark Souls 1 enemies if you have a good idea of what the game expects from you. So you're able to space her. I do have Lightning Spear at this stage in the game because I joined the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant. We made sure to exhaust all of those Lightning Spears before getting in with our Butchering Knife and taking down Quelaag on our first try as well. With her down and the second bell rung, it's back up to Firelink as we start to make our way to the mid-game, as Sen's Fortress and Anor Londo will be our next stop. Next, it's up to Sen's Fortress, where we are still rocking some pretty low-level weapon rarity. So I was really starting to feel the crunch here as our damage just wasn't up to snuff. However, given at this point in the game I hadn't really wanted to go down and explore some of the other areas that were open to us, such as the Depths or the Darkroot Garden, I decided to just tough it out, knowing that the Iron Golem isn't really a very difficult boss, all things considered. We do take him down, again using the Great Club that we picked up earlier in the run. Again, it is still just a common level of rarity, so doing less than 100 HP worth of damage on every swing did make this fight draw out for quite a bit. But again, luckily, as I mentioned, Iron Golem is not a very difficult boss, so we were able to take him down in short order and head up to Anor Londo. Now, of course, it would be very tedious, and I don't really think it would be super interesting to show myself picking up every piece of gear that was dropped for us in this run, and I think it might ruin some of the suspense that you might get if you try it out for yourself. But one weapon that we did pick up earlier was the Great Sword of Artorias. And again, I mentioned that every single weapon, and this does include boss weapons, have the ability to drop with infusions. This one was the very rare rarity, so there are still 3 higher tiers of rarity, but given the fact that it was already a weapon that scaled with our faith stat and dropped with the occult stat, or occult infusion, I knew that this was a weapon that I wanted to try and build towards. We are still quite a bit stat hungry, however, so it'll be quite a bit before we can use it. But this is just a weapon that we are showing off here. That again, every weapon in the game, including the boss weapons, can drop with infusions. And yes, that does mean that weapons that have innate scaling, such as the Great Sword of Artorias, will receive additional scaling if they drop with this case being faith scaling. Getting through Anor Londo took me more tries than I care to admit. as I must have been stuck getting into the cathedral itself for a little bit more than an hour, and I had to kill more Silver Knights than I can count in that time. We were eventually, however, able to make our way over to the Ornstein and Smo fight, but again, this was a very tough fight as well, as I think this one took me 5 or 6 tries to get through, whereas normally this one is not the most difficult fight, but depending on my build, I can usually take them down in 2 or 3 tries. But the damage output that they can do in this upscaled mod is definitely a lot more than I am used to. That and the fact that we are using some of our rarer loot, armor and whatnot. Again, with the increased weight, it did make some of the spacing for this fight a little bit more difficult, especially compared to what I am used to. After enough tries, however, the duo is able to be put down with the help of everybody's favorite Sunbro, and we unlock the Lord Vessel, the ability to warp, and the game really opens up for us at this stage. My first stop after these guys was, I figured, because we had a divine weapon in the divine great axe that I had been using in previous portions of the game, let's go ahead and head down to the depths, as this makes dealing with skeletons quite a bit easier. I also wanted to come down here in order to pick up the Dark Moon Seance Ring, allowing us to join the Covenant of the Dark Moons, and I was initially planning on grinding out the 10 Covenant items in order to get to the Dark Moon Talisman, as I really hadn't found an acceptable replacement at this stage in the game. I didn't end up doing that, however, as going through the Painted World, as we will do in a little bit, proved to be rather difficult. I did, however, on our way down here, join the Gravelord Covenant and picked ourselves up a nice and shiny Gravelord sword, which dropped with a rare rarity, as again, this is one of the loot drops in the game that will always have the same level of rarity, as I couldn't find a good way to roll it randomly. So this is just one of the ways that I am kind of guaranteeing that you will at least have some points in the game where you can guarantee yourselves a halfway decent weapon or perhaps armor piece, depending on where you are in the game. Again, now that we have the ability to join the Blades of the Dark Moon, I figured it was time to go back to Anor Londo and into the Painted World, which is what I was fully intending to do so. However, I forgot to go ahead and pick up the Peculiar Doll from the Asylum revisit, so instead we decided to go back there. With our damage still somewhat lacking, I broke out a low-class rarity Guardian Tail, which has the poison effect on it, and we fought against the Stray Demon. Again, a relatively easy boss, all things considered, but this fight was another one that took me quite a bit, as our damage output was still somewhat lacking at this stage in the game. With him down, however, we can go ahead and pick up the Peculiar Doll and then head back to Anor Londo, where we do go ahead and face off against the Painted World. And let me tell you, I think this was the most difficult run through of the Painted World that I have had in quite some time. This is a rather highly scaled area, and with the increases to enemy attack, defense, and HP, this certainly took me quite a while. And I think I must have been stuck here in the Painted World for upwards of 2 hours just trying to get through. The main culprit, of course, is the Bone Wheel Skeletons down underneath in the sewer area, as they are able to gank you pretty well, and they do an exceptional amount of damage, especially considering the upscaling that they received in this mod. Thankfully, however, one of the things that we are able to do here in the Painted World is take down the hoplites, and one of them was so kind as to drop me a Man Serpent's Greatsword, which is going to serve our replacement here for the time being. It is a very good strength-based weapon, and because I was leveling up strength and faith primarily at this point in the run, this was what I was going to go ahead and switch to before we were able to get some of the additional dexterity that we need to be able to use the Gravelord Sword and the intelligence that we are able to use the Greatsword of Artorias, which again was the kind of idea behind this run after I picked it up. And again, I'm cutting out quite a bit of the struggles that I had here in the Painted World, but with some of the souls that we had gathered from our time spent here, we were able to get up to the required level of dexterity in order to use the Gravelord Sword, and it made a rather quick work of Crossbreed Priscilla. So from this point on until I was able to use the Greatsword of Artorias, this and the Man-Serpent Greatsword were kind of my two primary weapon options, as I really didn't find another great option that dropped from in the game. With Priscilla down, I wanted to go ahead and head down into the Demon Ruins, where we have quite a number of bosses left alive, and this would be our first target for the first Lord Soul in this run. No Covenant this time, as we had to go through and face off against the Centipede Demon, which I don't consider to be a very difficult fight, so I decided to go through that route. And the drop from the Daughter of Chaos here is one of the more intriguing drops that I think I added to this mod. The Izalith Catalyst, instead of having a boosting special ability, this is one where I changed it so that lore-wise I think it makes sense. It is able to cast sorceries and pyromancies. There's also another catalyst in the game that is able to cast sorceries as well as miracles, and if you play through and you're able to find that one, it might serve you very well, especially if you can find a higher tier upgrade of it, as it has some incredibly high scalings, and assuming you're able to get to the soft cap of 50 intelligence and 50 faith in this run, which might prove to be very difficult, it just might be the best catalyst in the game in this mod. The Bed of Chaos is, of course, the Bed of Chaos, and it went down, although not without a couple of attempts, as the sweeping arm on the right side tends to lead me to my death more than once, but we were able to get through it. And I decided that at this point I didn't really feel like grinding out all of the Covenant items for the Blades of the Dark Moon, so it was time to go and face down Gwendolyn in order to get a good weapon buff in Sunlight Blade. We do just that, and we are able to go forth, pick up a very strong buff indeed. It was also at this time that I realized that you could stun Dark Sun Gwendolyn as a running jump attack with the Gravelord Sword, and an R2 poke with the two-handed attack was able to do so. And then my next plan of attack was to go ahead and face down the Duke's Archives, Crystal Cave, and on to Seath, as this was going to be a nice bounty of souls, as we weren't really doing an intelligence-based character, but I figured that this would be a good second stop after taking down the Bed of Chaos. Similarly, the Tomb of Giants is another area that didn't hold too much for us, so it was a trek and a half to get down there, but ultimately once we were able to make our way down to Gravelord Nito, it was high time that we were able to put him down with his very own weapon, as that became his undoing in this specific run. Not much left to do in the base game. There is really only Sif, the Four Kings, and then Gwyn, but we still have some DLC shenanigans to get up to. First stop on our checklist is going to go back to Darkroot Garden in order to face off against Great Grey Wolf Sif. Sif is not the most difficult boss, especially compared to some of the upscalings that have been assigned in this mod, as the damage output from Sif and the relative increase in HP isn't nearly what we have faced in both the Nito fight or the Seath fight, so we were able to take down Sif first try relatively easy. And I was kind of split here, but I decided to go ahead and take down the Hydra, which allows us to unlock the DLC. Sanctuary Guardian is one of the tougher bosses for me in Dark Souls 1. However, thanks to the pretty strong special effects that we have on some of our armor at this stage in the game, the Guardian fight was a bit of a knockdown, drag-out tussle, but we were able to tough it out, make use of our good healing, and take down the Sanctuary Guardian in the first attempt. Again, we could go face down Artorias at this stage, but seeing my stat spread and knowing that I didn't have too much to go in order to use the weapon that I wanted to finish the game out, the Greatsword of Artorias, I decided that it was a better routing to go down and face off against the Four Kings, as they will have enough souls to get us close to the appropriate amount of stats in order to be able to use that weapon. Again, Four Kings, also not the most difficult of fights, and thanks to the fact that we have some really incredibly powerful effects on our gear at this stage, we have really good special defense as well as physical defense against their magic and sword slashes. We were able to take down the Four Kings, again in a bit of a sloppier fight than I would have liked, but this does allow us to level up to the point where we can finally use the weapon that we picked up so long ago in the Great Lord of Artorias. And who better to face off against it with for the first time than the namesake himself. This also allows me to show that one of the implementations that I made in this mod, every single weapon can be buffed in this mod, not just regular weapons. I don't think it makes it too overpowered. There may be some balance issues, as, you know, if you have any while you play this, if you want to let me know what those might be. If you think weapon buffs are still a little bit too strong, given the fact that you can have some really high scalings on some of this stuff, be sure to let me know. But I will say that the Artorias fight took me quite a while, and I eventually had to go into the let's just stack a bunch of physical defense and poise type strategy, which was thankfully able to lead us to victory, but not after a long and drawn out few fights against the Abyss Watcher himself. With Artorias down, we go ahead and make the valiant effort and go ahead and free Sif for her fight in the assistance with us with the Manus fight. And Manus, again, I figured that we have some really powerful gear in our possession at this stage. I don't have the most vitality nor endurance, still rocking close to 20, where I probably should be a little bit higher, but I just threw on our heaviest gear with the best effects that we had available to us at this stage. We poise tank through Manus for a couple of attacks, made sure to have a good number of humanities in our possession for healing whenever we needed, and Manus surprisingly went down in the first attempt, although again this was a fight that took plenty of time, and if I did not get the gear that I had, this would have been a much different tale, but I suppose that is kind of the point of this mod in and of itself. No Calamite this time. Honestly, I just forgot about Calamite as I was excited to go ahead and face down Gwyn. So we go ahead, search our bottomless box for all of the gear that we have available to us that gives us the red Tearstone ring effect. We stack up every single buff that we can. We just come shy of one tap and Gwyn with a riposte on the Greatsword of Artorias, even though we don't technically meet the requirements on the one-handed riposte, which I thought was kind of funny. We riposted him with a weapon that we don't meet the requirements, and we still do nearly 4,000 damage to him with the riposte itself. One final hit against the Lord of Cinder, and he goes down. So hopefully you enjoyed this. You know, this is kind of a different video than I have produced in the past. Again, this was kind of a brief mod showcase. The version that I have up currently on my Discord, and eventually what will be on Nexus Mod, will probably be a little bit different than what I showcased here. But hopefully it was somewhat entertaining to follow along, and if you do play this mod, I would love to know your thoughts on the balance. What type of crazy, wacky weapons and armor were you able to find? Were you able to just go through every area in the game, mowing down fools with no regard for enemy life? Or was it a struggle in the end? Again, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, feel free to leave a like, a comment, or a subscription. And if you want to go ahead and try this out for yourself, instructions will be in the video description below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.